Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Love Bay family, as usual, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is human trafficking, specifically in North Carolina. So we have with us our co-host, Mark Daria, and our guest for the evening will be Apostle Stephanie Jordan of Abiding Love Deliverance Centre, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we are waiting for Apostle Stephanie to join us, and hopefully she still will be able to do so. But listeners, in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com, or you can text us at 437-778-3299. If also you happen to be watching us by YouTube or Facebook, you can send us your questions or comments that way as well. And if you have any resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, any local organizations or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Mark, I will give you a moment to greet our listeners and viewers on this evening.
Great. Thank you, Tia. And Love Bay community, good evening. Pleasure to be back here again. Looking forward to a lively and interesting discussion here this evening. And let's kick it off.
Well, thank you so much. So again, if Apostle Stephanie can join us, she absolutely will. So we're looking forward to hearing her voice on the issues as well. We want to, as usual, start with sharing some resources. If you would like to help us at Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. with our nonprofit endeavor, you can either go to GoFundMe and look for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. You can donate that way, or you can write a check out to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. and mail that to P.O. Box 15, Drexel Hill, PA 19026. One of our endeavors, the biggest thing that we do is provide immediate funding, emergency funding for individuals who are victims or survivors of domestic violence situations. So we help with transportation, we help with relocation from one place to a safe community, wherever that person or family needs to be. We help with medications, toiletries, whatever it is that the person or family may need. We try our best to help with, and we need help to be able to continue to do that. And we would like to share from North Carolina, the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Their website is nccadv.org. Their phone number is 919-956-9124. And if you go to this website, you will be able to find a list of domestic violence agencies that serve all 100 counties across North Carolina. The National Domestic Violence Hotline for the United States, the website is thehotline.org. Their number is 1-800-799-7233. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, their number is 800-656-4673. Or you can chat online, and their website is rain.org, RAINN.org. We have the Polaris Project, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Their number is 1-888-373-7888. Or you can text the words "Be Free," BEFREE. You can text the words "Be Free" to the number 233-733. And their website is polarisproject.org. Polaris is POLARIS. And again, we're specifically speaking of human trafficking on tonight. So in North Carolina, we want to share some human trafficking shelters and prevention organizations. And we first have the Charlotte Emergency Housing. Their address is 300 Hawthorne Lane in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2899 is the zip. Their phone number is 704-335-5488. The email that you can contact for more information is cbandsm@aol.com. Then there is the Charlotte Rescue Mission. Their address is 907 West 1st Street, In Charlotte, North Carolina, the zip is 28202. Their phone number is 704-333-4673. And for more information, you can email crm@charlotterescuemission.org. The Urban Ministries of Durham, their address is 410 Liberty Street, Durham, North Carolina. Their zip is 27701. Their phone number is 919-682-0538. For more information, you can email devel@umdurham.org. And the last resource we have for this evening is the Women's Center of Wake County. Their address is 112 Cox Avenue in Raleigh, North Carolina. Their zip is 27605. Their number is 919-829-3711. And for more information, you can email the email address Vicky, VIKI, Redding, REDDING, WCWC.org. So with that, we move into our topic on tonight, which again is human trafficking in North Carolina. And Mark, I wanted to start with sharing information that I read from the North Carolina Department of Administration. And it says human trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the country and one of North Carolina's most pressing issues. A crime by which people profit from controlling and exploiting others. Human trafficking afflicts victims from all areas for the purposes of commercial sex acts, labor, or services. North Carolina is among the most affected states. Major interstate highways, a large and transient military population, numerous rural agricultural areas with a high demand for cheap labor, and an increasing number of gangs all contribute to making our state a hotbed for human trafficking. And so, Mark, we've been preparing for this conversation, this topic for a while now. And as I began to do research specifically on North Carolina, my whole train of thought changed when I read this information. Because what stuck out to me was part of that sentence, large and transient military population being part of the issue. And my thought was, why is the military a problem? You know, and I couldn't shake that. And so I started to research that particular point.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I found, and I want to share this. This was a paper written by Major Catherine Grush. The title of this is Human Trafficking, the United States Military's Hollow Policies. And this is from March 2016. So I want to share a little bit of this and then we can move forward from that. But this again is from Major Catherine Grush. And it says the U.S. military has struggled to combat human trafficking in and around its Asian bases. The U.S. military's relationship to sexual exploitation and forced labor continues to be studied and analyzed by academics and journalists, even as the U.S. government enacts laws, regulation, and policy to prevent human trafficking. While treaties and conventions from the international community continue to highlight the plight of human trafficking, the U.S. military struggles to enact new policy and law set down by the government. Service members' involvement with prostitution since the Korean War has historically enabled the exploitation of women by the governments where American bases are located. However, as these governments abide by UN mandates and international law, criminal organizations have started trafficking women across borders to meet the demand of American service members. And in conclusion, Major Grush writes, the U.S. military has been complacent and ineffective at combating human trafficking in and around its bases in Asia. Interagency support from the Department of Homeland Security and outside committees of military and civilian professionals are needed to combat this global scourge. After this, and reading and going through other information, the thought that stuck with me, Mark, and that I couldn't shake was I think it's simple. You can't be a part of the solution if you're a part of the problem. Yeah, I don't know. Wait, I need a second to get some words because I'm telling you, like, that's how much it threw me thinking of how the military has an effect, a negative effect on human trafficking. And I know that it is not the entire military service of the United States. I know that. I understand that. But for North Carolina, and other places to state, the military is part of the reason why we have this problem. The military is part of the reason why this problem is going unchecked and growing. That's a hard pill to swallow. It really is. So I will stop there for a moment. But Mark, that's the foremost thought that I came away with as I continue to research. And again, it's you can't be a part of the solution if you're part of the problem.
I love your perspective, and this is the exact reason why we have these kinds of discussions, because I read that same excerpt, and when my eyes went over that, my eyes went over that, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm a vet, and I have nothing but respect for the people serving this nation. We owe them a great debt for everything they do to keep us safe and to allow us to continue to live the way we live. That said, let's parse out what you're observing, and you're absolutely correct. And that did not, my eyes went over it because it didn't strike me as anything strange. And you're absolutely right. You can't be part of the solution if you're part of the problem. Agreed. But first, you've got to recognize that you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And let's parse out what that means. Well, the military is comprised. It's a volunteer force that we have in the United States. So what's it comprised of? It's comprised largely of 18, 19, 20-year-old males who are separated from their homes for the first time, most probably, and in overseas conditions or situations, or across the country. They may be from California, now they're in North Carolina, or vice versa. So they're away from home for the first time in their lives. They're in a completely different environment. And then again, I don't want to paint with a broad brush here and say all. That's absolutely incorrect. But the military is a microcosm of this society. And just as society in general does not view strip clubs and the like as a detriment, overall, yes, people may not want it in their neighborhood, and it may be a bit of an eyesore, but most people don't sit there and really contemplate what that means, and that many of those places are women who are trafficked. And these people who run these institutions or these organizations are going to come up to wherever there's money. And you have a bunch of 18-year-old kids who have surplus money and, forgive the phraseology, but they're horny. So what are they going to do on a Friday, Saturday night? They're going to spend their money. They're going to go out, they're going to go drinking, and they're going to wind up in some of these houses. And they're going to spend their money on prostitution. And so it doesn't strike me as a crazy thing. Now, what's the responsibility of the upper echelon of the military? To raise awareness, to increase education, to discuss these things. That's the point where I would say needs to be pushed and needs to be emphasized. These kids are acting like kids cut loose from home for the first time. You can't expect choir boys. You really can't. And I'm not making excuses. And I love your phrase, and you're absolutely right. You can't be part of the solution if you're part of the problem. But the caveat to that is you got to see it as a problem. And again, the idea for most people is that these places, these houses of ill repute, are basically harmless, right? We all know the term victimless crime. We've spoken about human trafficking in here a number of times, and we come back on this all the time. Victimless crime is a constant phrase. The problem is there is no victimless crime, and I know even we've had this conversation between you and I is that well, what even if you have two consenting adults who are not being trafficked, but what does that do to the marriage? What does it do to a serious relationship if one of them's stepping out on their partner? What are the ramifications of that? There are no victimless crimes. There's at least one victim, if not two, and you could get into a morality discussion on that. And I'm not sure if this is the right venue for that, although I'd be happy to do that. But but that in a nutshell, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Thank you, Kenrick. So that's what we're talking about here, and we have to understand that, and it's up to the upper echelons. And so now we don't have to worry about it as long as the general's talking about it, and we'll just let them do it. No, that's not what I'm saying. Let's pivot back to what you and I can do about that. Well, we can contact our congressmen, congress people. We can actually tell them about this. Hey, I was just reading this article, and here's his, just as you just cited it, and say, we should not be moving this forward or turning a blind eye to it, more to the point, because that's what we do. And I was stationed overseas. I was in Germany. We had several of these places that were around our barracks. And why? They crop up for exactly the reasons I'm talking about. A bunch of 18, 19-year-old guys, nothing to do on a Friday night and plenty of money in their pocket from their paycheck, and that's where they would wind up after a few beers downtown. So, how do you deal with that?
So, well, I'm glad that you made the comment and said that you weren't making an excuse. And thank you for throwing it out there. Because and Love Bay, you know me, like I draw very, very hard lines. So I excuses don't fly for me. When we're talking about domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking, there's no excuse. So 18, 19, 20, and I just cannot believe that this issue is limited to the younger guys or even just guys. I know we have women in the military too. So I believe the issue is not just limited to an age, it's not just limited to a gender, but it's a problem. And it does need to be recognized, because my thought was, in reading information that I've seen, and we're talking about highways being a problem, interstate being a problem, my thought was bring in the military. Bring them in, but to come across information where it says, no, the military is a part of this issue. The military is helping to make this a bigger problem than what it is. So again, for me, there are no excuses, age, gender. It's a problem, and it really needs to be handled. And I really don't want to oversimplify the issue. And it's not just about the military. So, we're not just stuff on that. But to me, it just makes so much sense. If we know that there are areas that are most affected, do something. Like actually do something, and not just continually put out reports. And I mean, so add checkpoints, add more police, go to the top brass of the military, just actually do something instead of just putting out reports and watching men and women and children being snatched away and hurt and harmed. Okay, we have children coming from overseas to go to school, students coming in on visas to go to school. Okay, actually check the institutions, the schools that they're supposed to go to, that they're supposed to be at, be it in the US or, somewhere else internationally. Go to that school and make sure that they're there. And I mean, not just looking for their name on a roll. No, go have physical contact with them. Make sure that they're okay. Anyone coming into the country or going out of the country on a work visa, like we have nannies coming in. Okay, go to the house where this nanny is supposed to be and make sure that this is a safe place. Speak with her or him talk with them, and outside of the home, make sure that they're in a place where they're free to talk. Have an interpreter. Make sure that all bases are covered. Now, to me, that just makes absolute perfect sense. We When I think of human trafficking, the first thing that comes to my mind is the part that deals with sex, but we know it's about labor also.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are companies that are bringing in individuals to work for them, go and make sure that that company is legitimate. Have actual check-ins on a regular basis to talk with the men and the women and get them away from those who are running the business so they can be free to speak. Ask the right questions. It to me is very simple.
You're absolutely right, and you're absolutely wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. You're right. You're absolutely right from the moral standpoint. The problem is, and let's shift momentarily, and I want to circle back to the military and sex issue in a moment. But the problem with labor is this isn't necessarily a corporate wide thing, although it is. It stick its tentacles into corporations as well. But this is oftentimes an individual owner of a home, you, me, whatever. We need to get roofing done. I've got 3 bids from local organizations and companies for $10,000 a pop, roughly $9,000 to $11,000 to do my roof. And I've got a guy from country X who's usually employing people from country Y who speak none of the local language, and they're willing to do it for $3,000 plus cost of material. Now, me as an individual homeowner, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, well, I can pay $10,000 or I can pay 5. What am I going to pay? I'm going to opt for 5. These guys are going to do it faster. They're not under labor union rules. After all, they can be there at 6, 7 in the morning, whenever the local ordinance allows you to start hammering on roofs, and they wrap up at 6, 7 at night, as opposed to an 8-hour day. So they're done in 5 days as opposed to 9. And I'm paying half the price. Where's the problem? I agree with you, morally speaking. I'm a Christian. I believe in doing the right thing. I think we have to do the right thing. But here's the problem. Not all of society subscribes to that point of view. And people are going to say, I could save half that money. I'm going to go with that option. Well, now you're part of the problem, as you so eloquently put it. And you're perpetuating this. And you say, well, what harm is it doing? These guys are, living better than they did when they were in their home country. Well, you don't really know that. They're probably living in, a rented room with 10 people in it. But, all of that aside, this is the thing. Now, I want to pivot back to that military thing and close that out, because you drew a direct line between. I was speaking about prostitution, and you went right in and we're talking about abuse. I have never seen an instance where, and I'm sure there were plenty of them, and there are some, because I know the U.S. military in Japan has had some tension because there were rapes and some other things that are tied to that. But those are few and far between. Most of this that occurs is just prostitution. I say just prostitution with air quotes. But it's not encompassing the abuse, the beatings, that kind of thing. Now, are these soldiers picking up 14-year-old girls? And going back, the average age of prostitution in the USA for human trafficking is between 12 and 14 years old. Your soldiers are not hitting the girls that are 12 to 14 years old. These places are not there. They're usually women. They might be 17, 18, whatever. Nobody's asking for ID, obviously, but they're certainly not 12 to 14. So it's a little bit, it's a perhaps you'd say a distinction without a difference. I'd say that it's a nuance. That's different than people who are abusive relationships and the like. Different context, different discussion. But same thing. Exploitation is exploitation. And we can get into what the psychology is and why people are there. And I do think that would behoove us to do that. And because also there's another aspect. A lot of people who are trafficked don't want to get out or don't know how to get out of the lifestyle that they're in now. That, again, a foreign concept to us, right? We're like, hey, if I've identified you as a potential human trafficked person, and don't you want some help to get out of that? And oftentimes you'd be surprised. The answer is no. Why? Why don't you want to get out of that? Well, oftentimes it's straight. You've heard of the Stockholm syndrome, where you actually form bonds and identification with your captor. A lot of times this happens with human trafficking situations as well, where the person who's trafficked actually forms a bond of association with the person who's controlling them. The mental manipulation in this is incredible. The psychological warfare that goes on and how it's applied. There's practical aspects of it too. And again, we've covered this before, but it's worth mentioning again. Things like, and this happens particularly in the labor segment of it, where passports will be confiscated, and the one who's running the organization will have all the passports of all the people that they send out to do the work. So you can't go anywhere, not without losing your complete identity. And of course, that has different implications. So you have different forms of mind control that are in, they don't speak the language, they don't know the laws, they don't know what they can do and what they can't do. A lot of people, again, we've covered this before, come from countries where you don't trust the police. The police are your enemy. And so authority figures are not someone to be trusted. So to say, let's get you to the local police station and they'll take care of that, that's anathema. That concept is just something that just doesn't make any sense. Why trust them? They're on the take, and they're only going to send me back to the guy, and now they're going to be ticked off that I tried to run away, and they'll probably take a limb off. So I mean, these are hard questions. These are hard things to deal with. And one of the things that I thought was really good, as you mentioned, doing the research for North Carolina. North Carolina has an excellent program on teaching and getting law enforcement up to speed on some of these issues, being able to identify them, recognize when they see it, but also not just law enforcement and working with federal agencies and the like on this, but also teachers, educating teachers and bringing it into the school. At one point, I have to double check that. I believe it was being introduced to the 7th grade students to advise them and inform them that this is what's going on. Because again, that you can just glaze over this stuff. You're not paying attention to it, and it's in the community. It's all over, and you're not noticing it. Those guys working on the roof, who stops to say, okay, let me see your papers? And in fact, think of the ramifications of that, right? In a society, who says it's just become almost a joke, right? Now, what are we in Nazi Germany? Where let me see your papers. Who says that to the guys working on the roof? But we should be. Somebody should be going and checking that.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's so much saying it to the guys who are working on a roof. I think you need to be talking to who owns this company, who sent these men or women out there. You need to be talking to the one who is in charge, and you need to show me what documentation that you have that these men and women are here,
absolutely,
not just legally, but of their own free will. And I think there are times when we just need to deal with the ramifications, because you cannot take away someone's their freedom and their dignity, their livelihood, their just being a human being. So I believe that there are sometimes we just need to deal with the ramifications. I want to share some information from the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission, but just on the issue of prostitution, I want to say, I have to say, first of all, the decision for anyone who is involved in prostitution, if they're making a decision to stay, there's a reason for that. And we don't know what that reason is, but it's still, you need help. Whatever you need help. If there is a reason that you want to stay in this particular state, there's still help that's needed. And I will never be convinced that every person in prostitution just made the decision to do it. Just, hey, I just want to, I don't have anything else to do, or I think this is going to be easy. No, so we can't throw a blanket over it that way. And also, everyone involved in prostitution is not of age. If it's
By a long shot.
The military or anywhere. No, everyone is not of age. And I remember, I don't know if you've seen the movie. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't remember his name. The movie is called Dead Presidents. Dead Presidents was about a guy in the military. He came out of the military and he robbed a bank with some of his friends. I believe a couple of them were from the military with him. That's based on a true story. And I'm sorry, I cannot remember his name right now, but it's real. He wrote a book and he talked about his time in the military. And one of the things that he mentioned was how some of his, I don't know if you call it platoon members, teammates, slept with prostitutes. He specifically told the story of a little boy bringing his sister to the men where they are. And one of the men who slept with this, it was a child, he described her and he said she didn't barely have pubic hair. Okay, that's a child. That's a child. So can't throw that blanket over the military and say, they stuck within the age range, even if whomever they were with decided to be there of their own free will. It's just no, it's just not. But at the end of the day, it's an issue. And again, we're not just talking about the military. And really, we're not just talking about North Carolina. And we're not just talking about the United States. Human trafficking is an issue.
Sure.
And I think all of that goes back to the original point is that you cannot be a part of the solution if you're part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point about education, I think that was awesome. And one of the things that I did find from the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission, I thought this was awesome. As a part of their General Assembly related legislation, one of the things that they have done since 2016, human trafficking prevention and awareness is required to be taught in every public middle school in North Carolina. Yeah. That is awesome. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember as a child, McGruff, the crime dog. I remember when the Anthony Curtis. Thank you, Kenrick. Anthony Curtis. That is his name. So that story is true. He told a real story. He told about his experience. But thank you, Kenrick, so much for that. But again, I remember the police officers coming into our school. I remember firemen coming, the captain coming in and telling us, if the house is on fire, if you're in a room, before you open the door, touch the door to see if the door is hot. Right. Stay on the floor, crawl on the floor because smoke rises. If your clothes are on fire, don't run. Drop on the floor and roll. I remember all of that from elementary school and from middle school. So to be able to go into schools, as you said, and talk to seventh graders and let them know, like, this is real, this is happening, this is what you can do, and this is what you should do, I think is an amazing thing, because at some point, I believe the focus really, really does have to be on prevention and awareness, but actually talking to our young people and letting them know, and talking to our women and letting them know, like, this is real and this actually can happen. Hope it never happens to you. I hope it's something you and your family never, ever have to deal with. But we know of stories. The woman in Texas who, she went to a game, a sporting event. She went into the ladies' room and she never made it back to her family. She was taken out of that that event. Now, however you may say, it's few and far between. It doesn't happen as often. It doesn't matter. It happened that one time. That one time was enough. So again, to be able to give this information to our children. I mean, I even remember the talks when they told us, about good touch and bad touch. Like, nobody should be touching you inappropriately. And they gave us visuals. They gave us images. If you're wearing a bathing suit, any area that a bathing suit covers, absolutely no one is supposed to be touching you there. So to be able to put this on a level that our kids can get, and understand, I think it's great. because also from the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission, information that they shared, in 2022, the State Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force received a total of 18,873 cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a 48% increase from the year 2021. This is a 383% increase since 2019. So I think the ways that human trafficking takes place through technology needs to be brought to the forefront, because our children and people are being deceived online. You don't know who you're talking to when you're on these websites or these chat rooms or playing these games or whatever it is. You don't know who you're talking to, and individuals are grooming even adults to get them to a point to where they want them to leave your home and come meet me here.
Sure.
Leave your home and come and do this with me. Leave your home and don't tell anybody where you're going. So the internet, for all its wonderful purposes, there's a dark side.
Mm-hmm.
There really is a dark
Very
side that we
much.
need to pay attention to. And I just think to myself, like, I know that criminals are smart. I know that criminals know how to use technology, but I'm like, where are the good guys? Like, where? Because
The good guys are out there and they are doing their jobs. But remember, the good guys are also constrained by law, and maybe that's the wrong phraseology, but it's true. There's a lot of, it's a process, it's a procedure that has to be gone through. There's such a thing as due process, which can take months, if not years, in the backlog court system. You see, and these, as you say, these guys, the bad guys, are smart. They know how to manipulate the system. They know how to do things. They know for every wheel that's invented, they figure a way to turn it. And, it takes time. And also you're understaffed, and almost there's inter cooperation that doesn't exist between different agencies, rivalry, and that prevents them from going, but understaffing, jurisdictional issues. There's a whole host of things. And the criminals know exactly what they're doing and how to push those boundaries to their advantage. I hope you're not coming off thinking I'm defending this in any way. I am absolutely not. But, explanations are different than excuses. And we need to understand what's going on. That's part of the point of the training and the education that we're talking about that North Carolina seems to be executing well, is that we've got to, that first step is the awareness. And as we're talking about, if you don't see it as a crime, going back to that victimless crime concept, if you don't see this as something that matters, and I think this is where law enforcement can fall down. They've got a murder that they've got a homicide they got to solve. They've got burglaries in progress. They've got, drugs deals that are going down on the streets. And if somebody's in a cat house, that's not the biggest issue that's on their plate, and they've only got so many hours in a day and so many people to deal with these situations. So I think that's part of also what and again, the bad guys play to this. They know what's going on and they know how to do this. So, and when you couple that with people who are exploited, who are mentally and psychologically manipulated, who don't have any resource or anyone to turn to, this is a recipe for exploitation. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, just to your point, so we're talking about the average age in the USA for human trafficking of young girls is 12 to 14 years old. Stop that for a minute and think about that. And then you've got 25% of trafficking victims, according to this is a UNICEF number, 25% of all trafficking victims are children. 25%. Now we're talking about an industry that's $150 billion a year, 150 billion.
yes.
And of that is about 99 billion is sex trafficking. So the rest of it falls under the domestic, exploitation, having people live in your home that you're not from other countries that, aren't properly authorized, and force, and not force, but the labor issue that we were discussing. But 2/3 of it is sex trafficking. So, again, these places that encircle military installations or in your neighborhood, you know, down the street, massage parlors and the like. Yes, I'm calling them out. Any place where there's darkened windows and you can't look inside. Um, hmm, does that mean all of them? No, we can never paint with a broad brush. And, we can't be like Jason Frankenstein with the pitchfork outside the house. We can't do that. But we can gather information. We can be paying attention. And, in the military, there's an old discussion about situational awareness. Be aware of what's going on around you. Don't walk
Yep.
around with blinders on. Pay attention. Doesn't mean you have to leap to judgment. It means you need to be paying attention. And the more information you assess, the better prepared you'll be when you have to make a stand. And that's what we have to do. And again,
Yes.
I so firmly believe that the appropriate way to do this is get on the phone, write an email. We can do that. We don't even have to leave our living rooms anymore. And contact your congressperson and tell them what is going on and what you think is going on and what you think. If you don't want these places surrounding our military bases, certainly in the U.S. they can do something about it. Overseas, a little different. You're dealing with foreign governments and all kinds of things on that. You can't necessarily stop that, but you can certainly put the brakes on it. And again, that's where if the chain of command is involved in this, and they're saying anyone, and they can certainly do that. If you get a tongue lashing from your CEO telling you anyone caught in one of these places, and the MPs will be patrolling the areas, anyone caught walking in or out of one of these places is up on disciplinary charges. You're going to curtail most of that. So, but it's that blind eye syndrome. It's like it's the mentality that this is a victimless crime. It's not victimless.
Yeah. And so I think part of it is going to be the average person, as you said, having situational awareness. And then if you think or feel something is wrong, actually speaking up, taking some action. I believe that religious institutions need to do a better job. I commend Apostle Stephanie Jordan because she has not turned a blind eye. She and her husband, Apostle Tommy Jordan, like they understand, like human trafficking is real. Domestic violence is real. To this day, I still speak to clergy who refuse to believe that domestic violence is an issue in their churches or in their communities. I a few years ago, I was asked by a pastor to create a group in his church that dealt with the issue of domestic violence. Well, I did that, and when I did that, I had to go back to him and say, "You have 14 cases of domestic violence in this church. 3 of them are from the past. 11 of them are active." Never said another word to me because it was like this is not just something pretty to say. Like we want just another outreach ministry to add to the list. No, if you ask me to do this, I'm going to do this, and then you're going to be responsible for what comes next. I deal with pastors who say, "Well, they've been going through this for years; they'll be okay." That doesn't make it. that doesn't change. So I believe religious institutions, and not just churches, not just Christian, no matter what faith you follow, clergy needs to understand and take a role and be active in this, be active in prevention and awareness. And I believe that we also have to focus on the survivors, those who come across on the other side. If you are so blessed and lucky enough to come out of human trafficking, okay, now how do we help this person or these people or this family?
Right.
And it's not just about sex. That's a huge part of it, but it is work, it is labor. There are children picking coffee beans, cocoa beans.
Right.
There are children being forced to work 14 and 16 and sometimes even 20 or more hours a day. Something needs to be done. And I believe, again, the average person, religious institutions, need to step up and stop going along with the status quo. Um, I don't know what else needs to happen. Like, we've had this conversation several times. I believe we bring out different aspects when we do,
Right.
but how many more times do we need to talk about this while we're watching the numbers grow, while we're watching the profit from human trafficking grow, while we're watching the number of children who get pulled into this, while we're watching that number grow? How much longer are we just going to be sitting and talking about it?
It will, and sadly, it will never end. It
Yeah.
will never end. That's the truth, because man has a fallen nature, and man will always descend to his lowest lengths. That does not mean everyone. That does not mean that, but it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's funny when you talk about the coffee beans, because a quick related but deviated story. I was an election observer back in the early 2000s in El Salvador. And at the time, we had our local host was taking us up. We had the day off, and we were going up to do some tourism. And we went up to the crater, the volcanic crater that's there, and to the top of it, and take some pictures and all that. And as we were going up the mountainside, we saw these kids carrying coffee beans at the bottom. I might have it the other way around, but anyway, we saw these kids carrying the coffee beans, and so we pulled over and we gave them a ride and said, "This is crazy. Let's, they're going to hump this stuff all the way back up to the top." Or I think it might have been the other way around, might have been all the way going down, but whichever way it was, the point's still the same. And so they were very appreciative. They hopped in the car. I think it was 3 kids. They had like 6 bags, and they're throwing this stuff in. They were just so happy and laughing, and we got them to their house, and the father said thank you. And they were normally, to walk up that side of the mountain would take them the entire day, but since we had them back by like about 9:30 in the morning, he sent them back down to go get more.
Wow.
So that was our good deed. And again, this is what I'm saying: the mentality has to shift. And when you're talking to people who are so poor that they're going to exploit their own children, we can get on the corner stand and get on the high horse and start waving our arms in the air, but these people are doing this because they need the money for the food. And how do you move this? How do you move? You're asking a great question. How long do we have to keep doing this before it changes? And to some extent, it never stops. It's the starfish story all over again, right? We can change 1 or 2, we can change a dozen, we can change 100, but we're never going to change the millions. That can't be up to you. That can't be up to any particular group or a particular organization. It has to be an elevated consciousness of the state of the human mind. And that's asking for a lot, because we've got a very long history. And this is one of the things, and look, the history of mankind is, take technology aside. Technology, we're doing great. We're coming up with all kinds of great ideas. Got cars and planes and all kinds of stuff. But the human spirit, the human soul has not changed in all of recorded history. And that's the point that has to change. It's not how many, you see what the bad guys do with the technology, right? They exploit it. They can now triple, quadruple, and they get profits coming up and down. It's overflowing with money. Why? Because they can do it technologically. Human trafficking, it dipped on a getting people across borders during the pandemic, but it increased on the internet. Yeah. So you mentioned the grooming. Grooming increased like 4-fold, and that didn't go away. They found a new resource, and then they've exploited it, and they've continued to exploit it for the last half decade. And they will continue to exploit it until we squash that, and then they'll find some other way.
Yeah.
Because there's too much money involved.
And I think that's the bottom line. It's the money. And so I know, and nothing will ever be perfect. I know human trafficking will not be 100% eradicated, just like domestic violence and sexual assault. I mean, as you said, we are people. We have to deal with the human mind, the human soul as we are. But I just believe that there is so much that could change if our governments, not just the United States, those in key positions in leadership, if they made changes that were for the benefit of the person and not the dollar,
Mm-hmm.
I think there would be great change. There would be less dollars, but there would be more life, more healthy life. And let me say this because I'm not I'm not picking on the military. Like, I think the military is awesome. I do. Had I not gone to college, if I was not at Drexel University, I was going into the Marines. That's what I was going to do. But just like churches, the bad experiences with churches and religious institutions, just the small part is just bad enough. And it's like that small part just needs to be looked at and needs to be dealt with and needs to be corrected. But that small part, I don't believe it does, and it shouldn't overshadow the goodness of the whole. When I was a kid, oh my goodness, I thought the U.S. military was the best. Like, we were superpowers. I remember Reagan and Gorbachev. Like, we were the police of the world. That is what I truly believed as a child. If any other nation had a problem, we were going to go in and fix it. Um, I, I believe our men and women in the military are the best at the best. I mean, whew, Navy SEALs are awesome. Love them. My dad was in the Navy. My grandfather was in the Navy. I have family members who were in the military, but again, it's like that small part, that we have to look at. All police officers are not horrible. They're not.
Sure.
That we do need to, recognize those who do their jobs and they do it the right way. And as you said, sometimes hands are tied because they actually do it legally. And it'll take months to go through a due process and to get a change and get it done the right way. But my God, I'm telling you, it hurts my heart to see what I see, to see what we see.
As I started out saying, I mean, the military is a microcosm of the society that it comes from in any country. And again, exactly what you're saying, be it the military, the police, but society in general. The number of bad guys in the system is single digits. When you're looking at percentage, it's not 80% of the American population that hurts and goes out and victimizes, and it's in the single digits. But that if it's 8-9% of that's almost 1 in 10. And so that means every 10 people, one of them's doing something that's hurting other people seriously. I'm not talking about little stuff, taking a piece of bubble gum off the counter and not paying for it or whatever. I mean, that too, you can argue is a moral issue, but we're talking about stuff that's really serious, but that 7-8%, look at the damage it does to the society as a whole,
Right.
and the more, and you got to remember what they're focusing on is increasing their power and increasing their influence. So it's almost a disproportional relationship. They may be small in numbers, but they have very large tentacles that are going into all kinds of walks of life. And the other thing, the big problem for the other 92% of the population is that apathy. It's that, well, it's not affecting me. I remember I met a guy years and years ago. One of the closest times I ever had time, I probably shouldn't say this on the radio, but the closest time I ever came to knocking a guy on his butt. He was from the Midwest. I'm a New Yorker, and the World Trade situation handled me. It really got me. All kinds of reasons we won't go into here, but it was a very emotional thing. And guy from the Midwest, this is about a year or two later, it's like 2003, 2004. He says to me, he's with his wife and we're speaking, and He goes, well, that's in New York, and that doesn't affect me, and I, whatever, I don't care. And I had to literally walk away from this guy because I was about to just take him out. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That doesn't affect you. That doesn't affect you. That affects every American in particular, but everyone in the world, because it's an act of terrorism. Thousands of people dead, innocent people. I mean, you can't say that that is something that doesn't affect me. Then you've got some issues, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's a hard heart. It's not caring. Just with the issue, even the human trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, homelessness, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. If you care, and we say this all the time, if you look deeply enough into one issue, you're going to see how they all intersect. One person will be affected by all these things. But do you care enough to find out what the real issue is? Because a person getting high and drunk, well, they really may be trying to cover some pain that they can't express, that they're afraid to express, that they don't know how to express.
Right.
Someone may have lost a home because of what someone else did to them, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Do we care enough to find out what the issue is and not just push him out the door?
Well, just think about what you just said, and you're hitting a nail on the head. Just think about that. What is the most powerful drive in the human spirit? The most powerful instinct that we have is the instinct for survival. And when you can get to a point in your life where you don't care whether you live or die, maybe it's a slow death by alcohol, or maybe it's a quick death by, shooting up a needle or enduring the abuse. And it's going to be a relatively shorter time span. That's not the point. The point is that you are so negative on the universe that you've given up on everything, that your primary instinct of self-preservation has been circumvented. And and when you talk about people crying for help, screaming for help, and not knowing how to get it, there it is right there. It's every one of those people who we walk past on the street as they're lying with newspapers covering themselves. Those are somebody's children. They're somebody's brother. They're somebody's sister. And they had lives before they wound up in that doorway. And what was the story that led them here? To this point in their lives where they just don't care anymore. And I mean, it's a horrible thing. And you're right, the hardened heart. We've got to, that's what we have to work on, is that hardened heart in us, because that will enable us to be able to find some, and again, I've said this before in here, we can't solve every problem in the universe, but find a cause. Find a cause. You don't have to have 12. You don't have to have 25. You don't have to have 6. Find one. And dedicate some portion of your time working for some kind of resolution for someone. And wow. And it does work.
Yes.
It does work. And honestly, I believe there's nothing more fulfilling than that in life. Accumulation of stuff. I love Don Henley, right? The Eagles. He went solo, and he has a line in one of his songs. You don't see hearses with luggage racks,
right?
And I always love that, because we spend our lives accumulating. We got to get more stuff. Give me stuff. For what? When you die, your family sells it for a nickel or a dime out at a garage sale. All that stuff you thought was so precious, it's going for pennies on the dollar. And they'll be happy if they can get $200.
Well, again, I agree. And I agree with your statement. Find something, commit to it, and work on it. We all can't do everything, but we can do something. And I believe doing something will help. And so I know, just like, the other conversations we had, this is not an easy conversation. We don't have the answers. And I still have the same thought we started with. You can't be a part of the solution if you're a part of the problem. Is there an easy way to fix that? Very simply, I can say yes, stop caring about the money and stop caring about just yourself solely and look for other people, step in and help them. I believe that as individuals, I believe as the United States, we are supposed to step in and help others when
Oh
they
yeah.
need help. I truly believe that. Does it always work out to be? No. So it's easy to say that. I understand it, but we need to start somewhere because we are supposed to speak up for those who
Absolutely.
can't speak for themselves. We're supposed to defend those who can't defend themselves. Um, and I believe it takes courage to do that. I believe you have to be willing to lose something in order to do that. Are you willing to lose your name and your reputation or your credentials because you stood on this issue and you helped this person on that one? So it goes back to um, making a personal decision. Again, I know this isn't an easy conversation. There are no easy answers. And I don't want to oversimplify it.
Mm-hmm.
But, still, you can't be a part of the solution if you're a part of the problem. And that means if you're taking advantage of any um, endeavor that is taking advantage of a woman, a man, or a child involved in human trafficking, if we're talking about sex, if we're talking about cheap labor, free labor, if you're taking advantage of any of those, you can't help fix the problem. If
Mm-hmm.
you're turning away, like, I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to look at it, you can't help fix the problem. I have 5 children. 4 of my children are girls. I look at things differently. I
Yeah.
see things, it's just not the same. Like, I'm almost 50 years old. When I go out, when I go anywhere, my mother still asks me, where am I going? Who am I going with? Like, she wants names, and she did it, like, it was just a few weeks ago the last time she did it. I went somewhere and I just laughed because I do the same thing to my girls, and I'm like, it just never stops. I'm almost 50 years old, and I lie to you not. I have to give her. She wants
Good,
information.
good for her.
No, but so I think different. I mean, I want my son to be safe and well too, because I know boys and men are affected as well. But I just see things. I think how would I want my daughter to be treated? I know
Mm-hmm.
what I've experienced. I know what I've seen. But what do I want this world to be like for my daughter? What do I want them to see and experience? How would I feel if I got some news that was just absolutely devastating? I just, and so it's like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in somebody else's position, and now let's try to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take your time. It's going to take your energy. It's going to take maybe even your money sometimes. But are you willing to do that? More of us need to be willing to do that. And I swear, as a child, I had the thought, America, the United States of America, we were the superpower. We were the police of the world. You're supposed to go out and fix everything for everybody else. That's what I really believe. And I believe that we had the capability to do that. And now, like, even specifically with the issue of human trafficking, you really can't. And I believe you said this before in a class that you taught. It's real hard to stand in one spot and point to another country and say, "Hey, you can't do that," and you're doing the same thing. The pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah.
Oh, so again, no easy answers. Um, just no easy answers, and it's saddening. And I know we've said a lot. It's a lot to take in, and so Mark, I'm going to ask you to leave Love Babe with a final note on tonight. What you think and you feel, because I know what I keep saying, and it's not going to change.
Well, I mean, first thing, don't be defeatist. I mean, change is slow, change is incremental. But if you look at history, single individuals have turned the ideas of nations. Look at Martin Luther King. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, look at what they were able to do because they had visions, because they had thoughts, because they had dreams. and they were able to turn around the psyche of people and make people aware of what that is. But as a final thought, I mean, following up on what you were saying about the United States and about each of us individually, there's that old adage, with great power comes great responsibility. And we are the most prosperous nation in the history of the world. And it is incumbent upon us not to impose our views, not to impose our philosophies of life, but to make it a safer and a better place for whatever that complying with norms of civilization. That's the measuring stick that we need to put up against. And I overall, I think America has been able to do that most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. Not the place to get into this when we're over anyway. But but yeah, no, that's the thought I would leave with. Don't become discouraged. Don't become depressed. One person can make a difference, and maybe not on a national scale, but one person can make a difference in an individual life, and that individual life is as important as hundreds and thousands of them. So that's where I would leave us.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for being with us. Love Bay, we will have Apostle Stephanie Jordan with us on another occasion. And I want to say thank you to Kenrick. Thank you for giving me that information. That was awesome. And right on time. Thank you very much. But Love Bay, we just really hope that, again, a conversation is started or continued in your home, in your space, and that conversation eventually leads to some action on your part. So if you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tio on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Every Friday evening at 7 p.m. in Love Bay, we're continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.